Hello, it's Wetspork, and today I have another question that I wanted to put some emphasis on. This one is definitely more of a conceptual question that you might have heard of before, but to make the question more difficult, I want to add some stipulations or alterations to see if we can still come to the same conclusion, or at least struggle to make the same choice one would have in the original. This question is posed by Robert Nozick, and I'm probably saying it wrong, but it's going to be the way I continue to say it. And in its base form is a criticism against hedonism, which suggests that all actions are rational should they lead to the most pleasurable outcome. The question typically goes something like this. Given between real life and an experience machine which emulates real life to the same capacity, maybe even providing slightly more happiness, which of these options would you choose? Now, this question is typically posed with the experience machine simulating the real life exactly, but this slightly altered form will be more interesting to build off of later, so I'm going to use it for this case. It's also important that you assume that upon entering the simulation, you will no longer know that you ever chose to be in a simulation or are in a simulation, so there's no need to worry about deliberating on that part. This is overall supposed to be a comeback to the hedonist claim that one should always rationally choose the option which brings the individual the most pleasure, but it's probably pretty easy for both you and I to say that we would likely prefer to live in an authentic life instead of a simulated one, even if it's slightly less happy. This typically arises from the fact that we place a high value on authenticity and truth in our lives, which a pragmatic hedonist might argue is a pleasurable thing in and of itself to experience, therefore outweighing a simulated experience, though this might be a bit of a stretch on my part. It's also important to recognize that while for most people this answer comes pretty easy towards choosing real life, but should an individual not value the authentic life, it seems futile to claim that their act is irrational except on the basis of our own personal values. In general, though, Nozick gives a pretty decent kick in the ass to most hedonists, suggesting that they often place value on things beyond just pleasure despite from them claiming that they don't, or at least that none of these values is worth considering above that of overall pleasure. Now, the strength of this question is in just how easy it is to answer and difficult in a personal sense to deny living a real life. But I feel like minimizing the effect and utility of the experience machine would be something interesting, and hopefully a little more difficult to answer. For my examples, however, I want to effectively replace the experience machine with something more easily referenced, like a hallucinogenic drug or a time skip-like concept. In this way, the question should be more difficult to answer in the context that the experience machine-like effect is limited to certain aspects of life rather than be all-encompassing and entirely replacing it. Now, to get to my example, let's suppose that you're an avid gym enthusiast that likes to slot in time working out during your daily life. We're also going to make the assumption that working out is typically something you enjoy rather than just being something done for the sake of health or other somewhat emotionally superficial factors. Despite the fact that you generally do like working out, some days are going to be an absolute slog, and it's inevitable that they'll always be around in some limited capacity to plague your day. Now, let's suppose that the hallucinogenic drug I was mentioning earlier as our substitute for the experience machine is magically available to you on those unfortunate days. If you take this drug, you will still struggle to complete the workout as you always have, but from your own perception, due to the drug's effects, you will feel as if you're having one of the best workouts of your life. Of course, I know some of you guys will be the kind who enjoy persisting through the difficulty from the sense of accomplishment or grit you developed, which I entirely empathize with. So let's say that the drug will give you this increased mental toughness and sense of accomplishment alongside the perceived amazing workout. Now, I don't know about you guys, but unless this drug makes you spontaneously combust or die in extreme agony from terrible side effects, it sounds pretty nice. Obviously, we'll assume that there are no negative side effects, but you should see how although we've removed the full commitment to a fake reality like in Nozick's original proposition, we have effectively provided a supplemental, happier version of reality for a limited amount of time in its place. What I was aiming for with this example is to push past the obvious point that we value a life of authenticity, but make you and myself think about if the value we have in authenticity is the same for separate negative and positive experiences. It seems obvious that strictly negative experiences in our lives, meaning ones that offer no good whatsoever, even in terms of feelings of accomplishment or learning, can be more easily deemed as worthy of being replaced by an illusionary good feeling than an experience which was already positive. It seems in this case, then, that we really only value the authenticity of experiences which brought to us some amount of good, not really whole authenticity by its lonesome. To drive my eventual conclusion towards itself so, we can make it to the end of the video, I think that rephrasing my earlier example in a broader context like that of Nozick's and the experience machine would be helpful for both you and myself. So, in an effort to sort of emulate the original question, here's my proposition. Would you choose to live your life as it has been, or should you have access to a drug with no side effects that can cause you to perceive strictly negative experiences as having been positive, live life taking this pill? Also, a quick cut-in, but I've been referencing a pill this entire video, and I realize it's pretty much inevitable that I'm going to put a Matrix image in this video, but also keep in mind I've literally never watched The Matrix, so if you thought it was good, tell me. Getting back into the question I just proposed, though, I don't want to make this too easy because the gravity of Nozick's experience machine is in the fact that your decision is final. So we'll also have to suggest that if you choose the life with the pills, you will be forced to take the pill every time you experience something that is strictly negative to make it perceivably positive. So now we have this more tame version of the experience machine in the form of a drug which will effectively act as an occasional, time-limited experience machine. Now the liberty of the choosing of an answer is up to your deliberation and my own. I think that although I've at least somewhat succeeded in dressing up the experience machine question to the point that the answer seems less clear and more in favor of the drug, I still have a difficult time choosing. I mean, assuming that the pill will eradicate any strictly bad circumstances and artificially embellish us with the sense of positivity or intellectual enrichment one might gain from said experience, it's definitely and almost absolutely attractive to choose the pill. But there's also the romanticization that comes along with pointless suffering. Not to suggest that it's something inherently positive, but to suggest that in some way it seems like part of the human experience itself. It's also important to again consider that for those who have incredibly unfortunate lives, the pill might even seem like an incredibly obvious answer to them, but the opposite could be simultaneously true despite this suffering. I think that there's a lot to be left to individual interpretation in this instance, and I'd certainly enjoy what those of you watching, assuming there is anyone watching up to this point, think of this dilemma. Maybe I've dressed it up too nicely and am fretting over nothing, but at least for now, that's all I have to say. Have a good day.